Think building an MVP guarantees success? Think again. Too many founders still fail at this crucial step, not because they did not build, but because they did not build it right. In today's video, Darryl Kanouse, the author of The Architect Way, will be breaking down the most common mistakes that startups make and revealing the ancient philosophy of Taoist simplicity that can help you avoid them and build something that scales effortlessly. Stay tuned to learn what most founders miss in their MVP journey. So, Daryl, to set the stage for our conversation, could you share with us your journey from technology expert to integrating Taoist principles into tech development? What sparked this unique fusion?
Yeah, thanks. So I started my career as a software developer building marketing technology. And over the past 20 plus years, I've moved into technical architecture and product development leadership roles. I've worked on some pretty big systems, best-selling video games like Call of Duty, built personalization systems at Amazon. And I really enjoy these kind of big system deployments and working on these kinds of products. Um, but the spark for the fusion was drawn out by something that happened when I left Amazon and went to a job at Canva, another company that has lots of customers and builds big software systems there. The thing was that the cultures couldn't be more different. At Amazon, it's very process oriented and data driven. At Canva, it's loose, fast moving, very intuition driven. And I experienced a kind of a cultural whiplash where it's hard to find my way, and the processes that I was accustomed to or had become accustomed to at Amazon didn't quite fit at Canva. And so that got me thinking about the need to identify a common set of universal principles that could apply in any situation and could guide how I think about product development and technical solutions. I've had a lifelong interest in Eastern philosophies, mostly because for me, I find that they're descriptive and have a rational cosmology, fill some gaps in where data doesn't necessarily apply. And the Tao Te Ching in particular offered insights that I found useful in explaining the fundamental nature of the universe and how to act in it. And so when I was confronted with this need for some universal truth about technology development, I looked at Taoist philosophy and the ideas of simplicity and interconnectedness. It immediately just snapped into view that there's parallels in system design. And the way of the world really became evident as the way of the system and that sort of sense of flow and harmony. Uh, and so uh, I may have operated a little bit this way throughout my career anyway, but it was this experience of needing to really land on a universal framework that brought everything to the surface and kind of allowed me to flesh out the details and think through how that worked.
That's excellent. I love how you're able to integrate like philosophy and technology because I feel like this is very uncommon. Maybe I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong. But yeah.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think my experience in sharing this with people has led me to understand that people haven't necessarily thought about it quite this way.
So, were you always interested in philosophy? Is this something that have you read philosophy since you were younger?
Yeah, I think so. I consider myself to be a problem solver. When I
Mm.
see puzzles and challenges, I really want to dig into those. And I think that there's, especially as I'm younger and my education was developing, there's certainly gaps in what you can pick up there. And philosophy is an interesting supplement to our knowledge and how we think about things and how we solve problems. And yeah, I've always been very interested in it. And when I got into college, I read some books. I started getting into the Eastern philosophy stuff, of course, but there was
Mm.
also Arthur Young was an author that really inspired me through this idea of the geometry of meaning and really helped show me how the real rational ways of thinking about stuff like geometry have these applications in philosophy about the opposition of ideas and the kind of balance in the world.
Actually, it's very interesting because back in the day, there was no disciplines, right? So everyone was interdisciplinary. So it's like you're going back to the days when there was no like, okay, you're a technologist or you're a computer scientist or you're a philosopher, but it's like you're going back, but bringing the
Yeah.
computer scientists back into the times when there was, yeah, when it was more interconnected.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things that I enjoy about bringing the ideas together is it allows me to have a harmony and authenticity between my personal life and my professional life and technology.
Mm.
And these ideas that I think are of balance and of harmony, they work across all spectrums. And so it's a much more integrated life, I think. And it takes the idea of work-life balance as these two opposing things on a scale and turns it more into a work-life whole that fits and again feels real and authentic. So
I love that. So,
yeah.
in blending philosophy and technology, how do you strike a balance between conceptual thinking and practical application in product management?
Yeah, so the conceptual thinking here and the philosophical ideas serve as a framework for decision making. And practically speaking, product decisions can be validated against the direction set by these concepts in this framework. So if system harmony and balance are the kind of core virtues of the system that you're trying to build, that can serve as a North Star. And then the framework of ideas around interconnectedness and adaptability, balance, simplicity, the themes that come out of the Taoist view can be used as a kind of measuring stick against your decisions to ensure that you're headed in towards that North Star. And so they, again, it's like a framework around decision making that really where those 2 points meet.
Definitely, because when I hear you talk about simplicity, it just reminds me of the fact that how everyone needs to build an MVP first and that we should be as simple as possible in our first
Yes,
iteration.
100%. Yeah, yeah. Focusing on value, the problem you're trying to solve, and really, um, yeah, that this idea of simplicity, it really is one of the probably the core. Everything really boils down to simplicity, and the idea of the framework is the intention is to simplify. So yes, 100%.
Definitely. So, in your book, The Architect Way, you blend modern tech with ancient wisdom. For all non technical founders, can you summarize the core message of this approach?
Yeah, the core message is essentially that you can achieve harmony and sustainability in any system through decision making that considers the four key principles that I just mentioned: interconnectedness, adaptability, balance, and simplicity. Those principles, they all complement each other. There's some overlap. They work together as a whole, but those are the dimensions of it. And the mindful application of these principles can lead to a state of effortless action, or in Taoism, it's called Wu Wei, where everything just works and
Mhm.
you're in a flow state. And that's systems that are well put together and are effective in what they do have that kind of flow state in them. Data flows where it needs to be. There's not a lot of bugs. You don't get a lot of alerts. It just works. And that's the basic idea. There's a universal framework that can get you there.
It's brilliant. So, moving on to a more personal dimension, could you describe a particularly challenging period in your life that significantly influenced your professional path? And how did you overcome this hurdle?
Yeah. So I guess I'll use the most recent example. And I think similar to other folks with school age kids, we struggled during COVID to maintain some kind of normalcy. We had the kids at home and they were doing virtual classes and they weren't able to socialize and be with their friends. And of course, my wife and I, similar situation, you know, we were all, as we all know, we were all huddled together, and maintaining mental health became a priority. And that was when I was working at Amazon, and the time there was very demanding and it was taking a lot of energy. And I think I felt that my family needed more emotional presence and support. And it was one of those kind of classic, I want to spend more time with my family sort of moments. And that's what actually sparked my move to Canva. I wanted to try something different, see if I could get myself into a position that maybe allowed me a little bit more free time. And as it turned out, that Canva, being based in Australia with the time zone differences, I was able to stagger my work hours with my wife and it allowed us to have more of the time and attention with the family that we needed. I could still dive deep into some of the big problems and still have that kind of work experience. And if it wasn't for that, that sort of cultural whiplash I described earlier and all the impetus for the book and the idea is all sprung out of that. It was a blessing in disguise, maybe is a way to put it.
So you could also say that it's like a flow state, and then it ended up that you adapted, and then you use this Taoist principles as well to get
Yeah,
here.
yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, it's there too. Yeah.
So transitioning from challenges to achievements, what are you most proud of in your personal and professional life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think creativity is a virtue that I've valued throughout my life, in both my career, my professional and my personal life. Spent a lot of time making art and music and I, you know, enjoy doing those kinds of things. And so when I look at product development and technology, I think of them as creative exercises as well, thinking of features and, you know, problems to solve and how to release something that's interesting and compelling. Um, and I think this might sound maybe too on the nose, but one of the things I'm very proud of is this recent book. because I feel it has that marrying of the creativity with the technology. It brings a lot of things together in a way that I felt it was something that I wanted to say, and I felt my creativity was expressed. And so I'm proud of that respect. And I think the thing that really, just on a personal level, made me feel good about the exercise was hearing the audiobook and hearing Dan Barry read the audiobook and hearing the words come from somebody else's mouth in such a compelling way was really deeply satisfying. And I'm quite proud of that.
That's excellent. So you could say you're very fulfilled, right? Both your personal and professional life at this point.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I feel like it's partly because I found a way to harmonize the two things so that
Mhm.
when I find challenges in my work life, they don't knock me off my game, if you will. I think writing the book was a great experience to bring all that stuff to mind and to keep me focused on that balance, that idea of balance.
Excellent. So a lot of our audience are non-technical founders. Do you have any advice for them to reach this state where you are as fulfilled as you are now?
Um, so I can speak to it in terms of ways to bring these ideas into practice. And I think as non-technical founders, you'll be confronted with the need to make lots of decisions, and especially early on. Those decisions can seem outsized relative to their import over the long term. And so I think that the one of the keys is recognizing when decisions are data driven and when they're not, when they're more
Mhm.
experimental. And sometimes the data is going to tell you exactly what you need to do, and you don't need a framework for that. There's nothing. If you've run a test, A wins. Do A versus B. But there are other times when it's not so obvious and the data isn't
Mhm.
there. And those are, I think, the times when having a philosophy and having a framework for decision making can be really helpful. And I'll talk about the Taoist view and the universal framework that has worked for me. And it feels a bit like a checklist at first, where you'll be wanting to make a decision. And if you look at the ideas of interconnectedness, adaptability, balance, simplicity, and you compare your decision making against this sort of framework, you might feel like you're checking boxes. Is everything interconnected in the way that it needs to be? Which is the outcome that promotes the most adaptability, and so on. But I think that over time, as you start to think in those terms of principles and philosophies and frameworks, it starts to become intuitive, and you'll
Mhm.
recognize what does it look like when all of these things are together? And you don't necessarily even need to talk through it. You'll see it. You'll see balance and you'll see simplicity. And when things stick out as being unnecessary complications, you'll just recognize them for what they are. And so, like most things, it takes practice. And it's funny when we talk about a lot of philosophical traditions, especially Eastern ones, the term practice comes up a bunch. Practicing meditation and practicing your yoga and whatever aspects of it that interest you. So this is very similar. It's a kind of a practice in your professional life of applying these philosophies. And over time, you get better at it. And it becomes intuitive and internalized and useful in that way.
Excellent. So this is mainly for decisions that are not clear-cut decisions, A/B decisions, but for ones that we're like really unsure of. Because I think in the founders kind of journey, there's a lot of unclear decisions that you need to make. And I love that this principle can be like a guiding light for founders.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think I ultimately in as a technologist, I will let the data, rule the day. And if I
Yeah,
have data to tell me what's right, I'll certainly go with that. But yes, there's so much more to decision making than just what those data driven decisions.
definitely. So your company, Data Baller LLC, is known for its innovative approach. How has your Taoist inspired framework influenced your company's strategies and operations?
So I think that the biggest way in which these Taoist ideas has influenced uh, how we go to market has been in our product definition. We, as a company, offer APIs. It's an API first company, and it's about integrated decision making. So if you integrate our APIs with your systems, you'll have access to decision making around customer preferences and those kinds of things. And so you use your own data, use your own optimization metrics, and then we provide high volume, low latency access to like next best actions, if you will. The decisions that we made to, for example, not invest too heavily in the UI, to make sure that the interface were really simple and easy to integrate, use standards whenever we could, and fully open in terms of both what the interfaces and the data formats and all that stuff, to maximize the opportunity for interoperability and for integration. And we've deliberately not tried to get too complicated or too sophisticated in that front, but more leave an open service that our customers can take and integrate with their own systems in the way that feels best for them. And the hope is that when you integrate the product, what you find is a ever-present decision-making tier that can provide consistency across the experiences for your customers. And it's that balance and simplicity that will come through with having that kind of consistency. So I hope that made sense of
Yeah,
how
so
that all
like
comes together.
now I'm curious. So what can you give an example of a company that integrated your APIs into the system? Are they always tech companies or do you have like non-technical companies as well?
No, it's mostly tech companies. So
Mm-hmm.
the input data is going to be digital event data. For example, there's a video streaming startup that is using event views as the source data, and that it's in the most simplest implementation is, can you recommend the next category of videos that we want to present to our customers? And so they will feed us customer view data and customer interaction data. And then we will respond back with a standardized, simple set of other categories and videos that they can integrate with the user interface. And the key value in that is that it creates an interface that reflects back to the customer their preferences, but it's consistent in all areas. And generally speaking, it's pretty smart and accurate. And we use algorithms that will ensure that the engagement that comes from the customer based on these sort of recommendations aligns with the optimization metrics that our client is asking for.
So it's like when I watch a movie on Netflix and then the next one is like with your API back behind it, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it's like that. That's a common analogy or comparison that people make. I would like to suggest that ours is a little bit more subtle and can be used in more ubiquitous ways across the interface than just the next video recommendation. But yeah, that's the basic idea is recommending stuff like that.
Excellent. So considering the unique blend of technology and ancient philosophy you advocate, how can non-technical founders apply these principles in their ventures to enhance decision making and system design?
Yeah, so I think it's the comparisons, the choices that you'll make against those frameworks. So I think if you get down in the particulars of system design and you're looking at stuff like interconnectedness, you're prioritizing integration first. And so I think there's recognizing that no system is deployed in a silo. Everything takes data from someplace and put in response back with some other piece of information. Your system designs should consider and optimize those sort of open interfaces, right? And understand that you will be in a noisy environment, and how can you be a good player and a cooperative system, if you will, inside these environments. Adaptability is a similar kind of idea where I think we all recognize that systems that are sustainable, that's a virtue, and sustainability oftentimes is realized through flexibility. And adaptability is a part of that. In a system design perspective, you implement flexibility by modular approaches and modularization and avoiding monolithic systems, and recognizing that individual features and components can have little microservices is a great example of an architectural, paradigm that fits really well with this. And then when you think about balance, and you think about system design and are evaluating it for balance, one of the ways to approach that would be to think through trade-offs and how certain choices that you'll make will have impacts on other parts of the system, and making sure that you don't over-index, for example, on latency, but then somehow miss throughput as a consideration. And so balance in those kinds of ways, and recognizing how things are connected like that. And then, of course, simplicity, which I think we talked about earlier, and the understanding what is the key value of the feature that you're trying to implement, and what is the value of the system that you're going to market with, and how can you uh, remove the sort of peripheral things. And I'll give one kind of common example of where simplicity comes into play that people might sometimes miss is in setting up alerts and system monitoring and those kinds of things. It's very easy to make just a bunch of noise that makes it actually difficult for you to understand the health of your system. And so sometimes really what you want to do is simplify down to a couple key KPIs. Those are the things that you want to look at and really focus on those things that matter.
That's excellent. So in terms of system design, you can use these principles to make sure that you're making the right decisions, and also in terms of simplicity as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from your extensive experience, what are some common technological challenges you've seen? And how does your framework help address these?
I think the most common challenges I see in technical development are usually rooted in the teams and processes that make those systems. And I'll say, for example, with large teams, it's very common for silos to appear. And in these development silos where individual teams are working on certain components of a system, they may recognize the need for an additional feature and they may start building it. And then another team recognize the same need. And now you end up with duplication of effort. And now you have these sort of redundant elements of it. And one of the things that we really want to encourage with the framework is to reduce those silos by thinking about that interconnectedness first and recognizing that there will be integrations. And when you prioritize that kind of thinking, it will occur to you to reach out to the other teams and to compare roadmaps and to check and make sure that everybody's aligned on the same vision. So yeah, the technical problem being redundancy of features and over engineering. And I think the solution there is the kind of integration. And that's on the big team problem. There's a counterpart to that, which is on small teams. You often want to prioritize speed because usually you're small and you're trying to be agile and you want to move very quickly. It's easy also to let yourself either over engineer or miss where you're going to need to come back and fix a problem later. And so scalability tends to be one of the big ones, and interoperability is another one where, again, you're thinking about a core set of features and you're envisioning an output. And the recommendation, from my perspective is it's okay to take some time to pause and evaluate the landscape of where you're going to ensure that you're laying a foundation that will support future integrations and be flexible and all those other kinds of things.
Definitely, because I think with small startups, they opt for speed and sometimes they miss points of scalability, and then they get to the point where
Yeah.
they have too many users and they have to shut down the software and then start again in a few days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is a
Sometimes
fun
it,
problem to have, right?
yeah, it's like, there's nothing, some of the most exciting times in my life have been during those really early phases where everybody's just like excited to get something out the door and you're pushing and then the users come and then it's that sort of make or break moment. Were you actually ready for all those users? And what happens? And you hold onto the table real tight and just hope that nothing breaks.
Yeah, but it's true. You should opt for scalability, right? Just
Yeah.
just in case.
Yes, exactly.
So many of our listeners are navigating the complex tech landscape without a technical background. What would be your top piece of advice for them?
I think first and foremost, it would be to be clear about the problem you're trying to solve. If you're navigating the technical landscape looking for solutions, be real clear about what the problem is. And I think you'll find lots of technology vendors and other companies will offer full suites of tools and try to sell you on a need that you don't actually have. Hey, my thing does this amazing reporting stuff, and is that really what you need right now? And so I think that's an important thing to consider. And then but once you have that idea of the problem that you're trying to solve and you're evaluating technologies for their fit to purpose, one of the top things I would recommend looking at, even for a non-technical founder and person trying to navigate this landscape, is integrations and thinking about, is the technology that I'm about to choose going to serve my long-term purpose through the kind of integrations that I need? And the way that what that looks like is, proprietary third-party systems. Is that really the thing for you? Are you going down a path where that will be your strategy, or are you you want to maintain flexibility going forward and have a more open system? Yeah, identifying the problem and then making sure that the potential solutions fit the purpose. And I would recommend looking at that purpose through the lens of the framework. Are they interoperable, adaptable, simple? Do they exhibit balance?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's good to have your framework because I think these days founders just have so many options, right? You can integrate with so many different kind of systems, and it could definitely get overwhelming sometimes. And yeah, and knowing where to go would definitely help.
Yeah, for sure.
So looking ahead, how do you envision the future of technology development as more leaders integrate principles like those in Tao Te Ching?
So I think so I'll start by mentioning AI because I don't think you can talk about the future of technology without talking about AI. I think it's the big elephant in the room for everything. And it's very new, and I think we're still trying to figure out what its application is in other places. But it's at that phase where it illustrates what the need for a framework might be. And for companies that want to integrate AI, there's not a ton of standards around. There's prompt engineering and there's ways to create outputs. But if you wanted to use AI for automation, for example, and to output instead of prose or Python code, but you wanted a set of instructions for how to work through a workflow, for example, we don't have really good standards for that. And if interconnect and simplicity and balance and adaptability all become priorities in how we think about system development, then I think we'll move towards trying to get more standards in these areas and trying to find ways in which, with the whole proliferation of various models, whether it's from OpenAI or from Anthropic or whatever, that you can connect with them through a kind of standard set of views and interfaces to achieve these sort of integrated technology outcomes.
Definitely. I think that's really good advice to close up on. So, yeah, thank you so much, Daryl, for coming on Techno Founder podcast today and sharing all of your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great. I really enjoyed chatting.